This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. This week is episode number 558, and we welcome Mr. David Kiser. We're going to be talking about cleaning for health. Looking forward to a great show. This is a topic I really enjoy, and I look forward to talking to David more about it as the show goes on. Before we get started, let's thank our platinum sponsor.
IAQ Radio Platinum sponsor is John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at jondon.com. That's JONDON.com.
I also want to thank our gold sponsors, Particles Plus, Healthy Indoors Magazine, Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions, and AEML Inc. Laboratory. And of course, our association sponsors, CIRI, the Cleaning Industry Research Institute, the Indoor Air Quality Association, and the Restoration Industry Association. I also want to remind listeners about the Healthy Building Summit coming up October 16 to 18 at Seven Springs Resort in beautiful Somerset, Pennsylvania. This year's theme is Practice to Research. We'll be developing ideas for researchers on what we really need in the field and what kind of research we would like to see them working on. So if you can join us, check out the website at healthybuildingssummit.com. All right, let's turn it over to the Z-Man for today's IAQ Radio trivia question.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man with this week's IAQ Radio trivia question.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations go out to Andrew Gonzar, Certified Safety, St. Louis, Missouri, for being first to identify the Bellevue Stratford Hotel in Philadelphia as the place a 1976 outbreak of pneumonia infection occurred. The IQ Radio Trivia question for today, Friday the 20th of September, 2019, has been sponsored by Ideas, the solution chemistry company providing unique solutions to odor removal, surface cleaning, and decontamination problems. Here's today's trivia question. Name the person who coined the term greenwashing. Back to you, Joe.
All right, so we've got David Kiser today. David has cared for indoor environments through his career in the mechanical and cleaning industries. David and his wife, Carrie, also started and operated a family cleaning business for over 30 years in Northern Virginia. Champaign Services held the CIMS-GB Certification. We'll be talking about what that is as the show goes on. They served hundreds of the same clients for decades. They are founders of the Association of Residential Cleaning Services, and he served as the first president of ARCSI. Champaign Services was also the first residential cleaning services to join the Cleaning Industry Research Institute. David spearheaded and served as the initial chair of the IICRC's House Cleaning Technician. They sold Champaign Services in 2015, and he is now an author and working as a consultant, instructor, and author. And he's got a great book called The Professional House Cleaning Technician's Manual. We'll be talking more about that. Welcome to the show, David.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Cliff. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Let's start out with how you got involved. You were in the mechanical industry early on in your career, and then kind of transitioned over to residential cleaning. Tell listeners a little more about how that happened.
Okay, sure. And before I get started, I'd like to just give a shout out to Joe Dobbins. I know he's a listener to the show, and him and his wife, Janet, have been very supportive of the residential cleaning industry. And the reason I mention his name, I know he's been going through some health issues, and he's hopefully feeling a lot better. And he's also a previous winner of the trivia question.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Best wish Joe out there.
Yeah. So welcome, Joe, if you're on. I just want to tell you a little bit about my background so that you understand a little bit about where I'm coming from and as it relates to the industry. My background, the mechanical, we just talked about the Bellevue Stratford Hotel. That was where Legionella was coined, that term and that name. And we've talked a lot about that recently because it was really a cleaning problem that was a clogged drip pan in a cooling tower that was the culprit, and it was a lack of cleaning maintenance. But my background was involved in starting the cleaning industry was really because of my wife, Carrie. She had started cleaning houses as an alternative to being an admin assistant, executive assistant, and commuting into DC. And so she was doing really well, and I had gotten hurt as a pipe welder and a boiler maker, and I was helping her a little bit as I was recuperating. I was like, man, she's not commuting, she's starting later, getting home earlier, we're not paying a babysitter as much, and she's making great money, and people love her work, and there's something to this cleaning thing. And so that's really how I got into it. I was helping her pass out some flyers. I would pass out flyers in the evening while she was cooking supper. And we blew up a business within 3 years. I bought a small commercial business of my uncle's too. And with those efforts, we built $1 million business in about 3 years. We were part of the Building Service Contractors Association International and the National Capital Chapter. And that's where I got a chance to really meet some mentors, people like Jim Purcell and Jim Netterstrom and Robert Sanders and people who really were interested in promoting and improving the cleaning industry. And that's where a lot of the founders of BSCIA came from, was the Washington, D.C. area. And so I was able to really learn a lot from them and use them as sort of a guide and become their disciples, so to speak. Maybe a lot of them don't know that or appreciate it, but I certainly did, and I've told many as well.
Well, how, I live at a little resort up here in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and the people up here, and I assume in many places, they look at cleaning as a commodity. And it's all about the price, and they don't really ask you, how do you clean or why do you clean or anything like that. I'm wondering, I know that's something that's close to your heart, and how do we change that? How do we get the cleaning industry to not be looked at as a commodity, but more as something else?
Well, one of the things that people get confused about, because they just don't know, and this is part of what we can do a better job at is as thought leaders in the industry, is that people think everybody can clean. Anybody can clean. It's sort of a low skill level work to do. They compare it even as lower as like being an Uber driver. At least with the Uber, they have some other third party licensing their drivers and forcing them to provide insurance for their cars. That's not even done in the cleaning industry. However, cleaning is really the first line of defense in healthcare. And so to do it properly is really a way to prevent sickness and illness and promote health in the home especially. And more people get sick from the home environment than any other single place. A lot of people don't realize that. And it's hard to measure when people don't get sick because of good cleaning practice. So very, very tough job to be able to communicate and telegraph to the public, to even our industry, that cleaning is not a commodity, but it's something that is a true craft, just like welding was. I had to have all kinds of certificates and papers and credentials for the kind of steel I was working on, for my credentials that I was able to weld a joint in a piece of pipe or on a piece of steel plate in a boiler. And so I thought, well, lives are involved, that's why. Well, lives are involved with cleaning as well. People just don't realize it. And maybe they don't die from a lack of proper cleaning that day, like a boiler explosion will cause that. But they do get sick. They have a lesser quality of life. And many times, sadly, they do die. And so we need to be able to tell that message better, not just to the people who work in this industry, the people who are on this call, but we need to be able to telegraph that in a broad, clear way to the masses.
David, I think this is a perfect point to when you and I were at the CIRI event, and Dr. Gene Cole had a very sobering presentation on what happens in nursing homes when people go in and out of them. And I'm wondering if you could recount part of that for the listeners.
Gene told that story about a scenario in a nursing home, and he was pretty solemn about his story. And while it was illustrative, it certainly reflected what really does happen. And we have the sad outcome of how disease moves from one person to the other. What he had to say was that when somebody gets sick in a nursing home or assisted living facility, they might be sick 2 or 3 days. They have a doctor look at them, but over the course of that 2 or 3 days, they get progressively worse to the point where the nursing home can't handle the care required and the treatment required, so they're moved to a hospital setting. Well, 2 or 3 more days go by, maybe even a week, and they continue to worsen, and they die. And maybe they had a respiratory illness or some other kind of bacterial infection, et cetera, that killed them. And what happens is that room they vacated in the nursing home or the assisted living facility, it may have been cleaned in a cursory manner when they went to the hospital. But what happens is the money side of the equation is that's a vacant room. And the facility has an obligation to fill it. And there are many, many people waiting for that room. And so no real intense, serious attention is given to the protocols and the practice of cleaning that room in a manner that really makes it ready for a new occupant. It may not get cleaned at all, other than that cursory cleaning that the housekeeping might have done when the person moved out. They might put new linens on the bed, or just do a cursory dusting, or wipe down with some clean solution of the knobs and the toilet seat, etc. But for the most part, there's no knowledge about and no required regulation to say that this room needs to be cleaned in such and such a manner upon its vacating. So really serious problem. And by extension, when people come to visit those people, when people work in those environments and they take those things home with them, they may not be sick themselves, but they may carry harmful pathogens on their clothing or their water bottle or what have you. And that's how disease and illness is perpetuated in the community.
David, when we talked before the show, you mentioned 2 things that I thought were, I took some notes and I wanted to ask you to repeat back to listeners your thoughts on these 2 kind of topics. One was that the cleaning people are caretakers of the indoor environment. I thought that was a great way of putting it. And the second was that you feel that the cleaning industry has to have a stronger and clearer voice about what threats or dangers lack of proper cleaning poses. But then, we also have we got to be careful in doing that we don't become fear mongers. And I'm wondering how you recommend people straddle that line there.
Well, my experience in being a fear monger is that you go put your head in the sand and ignore the threat. I think the term "only science can see" is a powerful term that we need to pay more attention to. It deserves more respect than it gets. Science is clearly helping people, and historically has helped people in the world of cleaning and infection prevention. And that's been the case down through history. Even before germs were really recognized, the first postulates that were published on germ theory was about 1890, 1870. They were first talked about really in terms that we understand them today. But even before that, during the Civil War, for example, Sally Tompkins was a person who served in the Civil War, and she opened a hospital on her own, with her own family's money, private hospital in Richmond, Virginia, called Robertson Hospital, and she insisted on cleanliness. And because of her insistence on those kinds of practices, out of almost 1,400 people that they took care of, only 73 deaths occurred in that hospital, period. Not 73 from non-combat, just 73 deaths. It was unheard of. And it changed the way people think about how they practice medicine in a hospital setting. And we need to think that way about how we live. What causes disease transmission? How is infection spread from one person to the other? And it doesn't take a lot. We don't have to be fear mongers, but an example of some of the things that have really helped is understanding just in the last few years the threat of MRSA. MRSA is something that is a super germ. It's not a germ that existed when our grandparents were alive. And so by practicing good hygiene, we are able to reduce the threat in the community and in hospitals of a superbug like that.
Cliff, let me turn it over to you.
Well, I can tell you, my wife had a personal story with it. She went to New York for a couple of days to help my son find an apartment when he was going to go to school there. And she bought a new pair of shoes, and she's walking around, and she ends up getting a blister. And, within hours, that blister became a MRSA infection. She was hospitalized up there for several days. And I know you also had a personal experience with MRSA, and yours was a much closer call. So,
right. I heard most of that. I heard
Okay.
most of that, Cliff. I'm sorry to hear about your wife, and that's interesting that you share that story because when we were at Series Symposium at Miami University, Keith Whiteley, he was the keynote speaker. Do you know he told me his daughter in Australia had a serious issue with MRSA? So it's not something that just people get in hospitals anymore. Super germs used to be pretty much relegated to the environment of the immune compromised in a hospital setting where there's a lot of congregant people who are sick, but that's not the case anymore. And so, yes, I had MRSA. I got it in 2004, and in the spring, it was on the back of my hand. I had a little blister cut or something. I don't know what had happened, but it didn't heal, and it got a little bigger and a little bigger, and it got to be like an open, oozing kind of a wound. And a friend of mine looked at that, and he had seen me a couple weeks earlier, and I had just been trying to doctor it myself, and he said, "Man, you need to go to the doctor about that." And I did. I hate doctors, but I love doctors as people. But the whole system is like, who wants to be sick, right? So I went to the doctor, and they did a culture, and I went to the doctor on a Thursday evening, and on Monday morning I got a call saying, "You need to go see an infectious disease doctor right away. It's an emergent situation." And they didn't tell me what it was, but it turned out it was MRSA. Anyway, in those few days and a couple days after that, the infection had spread to my arms just by touching, it was up here on my arms. on my upper arms. It was on the calves of my legs. It was insidious. It took my daughter is an ER nurse. It took her 45 minutes during the height of my MRSA infection, which was over about 3 months, to just dress my wounds every day. And fortunately, she was able to talk to the wound care nurses at the hospital where she worked, and they told her to get me silver ionic bandages. They were only available at the hospital, and that was a big key in being able to address the MRSA infection. I eventually did have to have a new drug that was only released in 2000 called Zyvox. It's a sulfur drug, and it was able, and those pills, a course, 7 days, was almost $2,000.
Wow.
So it's a serious problem. And a lot of people don't realize this. We've talked about it. We talked about it at CIRI. But a lot of people don't realize regular staph can live in people's noses, and about 30 to 33% of the population carries it in their nose without being sick from it. With MRSA, which is a resistant staph infection that was not even on the scene until 1961, and the first human to have it that's on record is in 1968 at Boston Hospital. But 2 people out of 100 carry that in their nose without being sick from it. So imagine this. You're at work and somebody has it and it's in their nose and they sneeze and it gets on the doorknob, the moisture particles from their nasal passages, and you touch that doorknob and then you wipe your face a few minutes later, which, by the way, people do about 15 to 18 times an hour, right? So people don't realize that, but Chuck Gerba will tell you. And then what happens is then it colonizes in your nose, and then maybe a day later you sneeze on a cut or something and it gets on your skin. And then now you've got a serious problem. There are people who have died from the skin infections. It's not as common as getting it internally in your lungs and so forth, but it can happen. And I told the story, you know this, Cliff, I told the story of my client, his son, Calvin and Janet Hill, their son Grant, had MRSA, and it almost killed him. Almost killed him.
David, you also mentioned the CIRI conference, and at that conference, Carl Grimes was also one of the speakers, I believe. He's been a frequent guest on our show from Hayward Score, and he has talked about the fact that one consistent issue they find in homes where people have health issues on their Hayward Score, which is, they've had thousands and thousands of
40 or 50,000, I think.
Yeah. The one consistent thing they find is there's excess dust essentially in these homes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
My wife is a nutrition expert, and yesterday we were listening to a doctor in a summit that she has recorded. The doctor's name is Sarah G, and he talked about Alzheimer's and how terrible thing that is. Anyway, what happens is dust in a home, you can breathe it, and it will get up into your nasal passages and your sinuses, and it's got a relationship now that they've been able to link that to Alzheimer's and other kinds of disease because it can get past the blood-brain barrier. And this is new information, and it's pretty sobering. So controlling the indoor environment, keeping dust levels at a minimum is really a critical thing. Now, a lot of people talk about, this clean environment, it's all too clean. We don't build up enough antibodies. We don't build up enough resistance, and that's a problem. We're not talking about that. There is a sound argument for some of that, but this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about dust that accumulates from pollen that blows in from the windows, dead human skin, dust mites that eat it, their feces, rodent droppings, which a lot of people don't realize. Most people have rodents in their house of one kind or another, period. You can say you don't, but you're fooling yourself. So,
we also talked about vacuuming, which is I just find that to be a very interesting topic. I started in this business in the asbestos abatement world and asbestos consulting, and was introduced to HEPA vacuums and air filtration devices and cleaning through that. But HEPA vacuuming, or vacuuming in general, I wonder if you could give people some tips maybe on how you handled vacuuming in your cleaning business.
Right. So a lot of people don't even know what HEPA means. If you talk to a consumer, they don't have a clue. So just for everybody, the history of it, it stands for high efficiency particulate arresting filtration. That was its original acronym, but they've sort of changed that to be high efficiency particulate air filtration. And what it is it really is a filter media that you can put in an air filter in your home for your HVAC system. And I recommend that you do that possibly if you can. But they also have that same filter media for vacuum cleaners. There are a lot of vacuum cleaners out there that really sell as a feature that they don't have any bags or filters. I think that is not a good vacuum cleaner, because one of the things that people don't realize is that it's not just about picking up soil, it's about reducing the emissions that come from that vacuum cleaner. Vacuum cleaners move an enormous amount of air. And because of my background, after I was a welder and a boilermaker, and we had our business, a cleaning business, a few years, we had a son born with Down syndrome in 1986, and I left the clean business, sold the commercial side. My wife and her mother ran the residential side for many years, and I took a sabbatical and went back into the management of mechanical contractors, and after a couple of years worked for the president of a boiler manufacturer. And so I'm telling you this because I really got to understand airflow and combustion and what happens with moving air and controlling air, and because that's what you do inside of a boiler for proper combustion. And so I always was puzzled, well, why don't we, like we control commercial buildings with air handlers and desiccant systems to control humidity and all these things to control the airflow and air changes in a commercial building, why don't we do that, or at least have some better regulation of that in a home instead of just opening windows? Well, that's a great question, I think. But one way to really get healthy in some places is breathe some fresh air. But more and more people are getting sick when they open the window, and it's becoming more and more important to control that indoor environment, especially if you have construction going on nearby, or if you are on a farm where glyphosate is being used, or other pesticides, those kinds of things. In cities, you have pollution from vehicles and other places. So controlling the indoor environment, making it a safe, inviting place to be, just like in a commercial building that controls the air, is becoming more and more critical every day. And we talked about Joe, your buddy from summer camp. He's all about controlling that indoor environment in the same way from a construction standpoint.
Yep. So you mentioned when we talked, and I looked at it a little differently after we talked, because I think it was a good point. We want good filtration. We want sealed HEPA on our vacuums, but also it's important that vacuum create a negative pressure when you're going across things. So, and you mentioned that you get better cleaning on the backstroke than on the forward stroke on a vacuum. I wonder if you could explain a little bit about that to listeners.
So, we were just talking about the carpet attachment. Most commercial environments do not have plush carpet. Most homes do have plush carpet, and that plush carpet presents some unique challenges. You want to lift the carpet fiber and then evacuate the soil that's down deep. In order to do that, you need to groom it, not beat it to death. A lot of people are sold on the idea that you beat the carpet. Well, I come from the world of a farm, and when you put things in a silo or you are pouring concrete in construction, what do you do to get it to settle and come down deep? You vibrate it. That's what you do. And so when you're trying to vibrate or beat the carpet fiber, you're just causing that soil that's in the carpet to go down deeper. But if you comb the carpet fiber up, and you make it easy for the soil that's down deep to evacuate out of that carpet, that's the very best. And so besides the carpet attachment with its own separate motor that grooms that for optimum soil evacuation, there are all kinds of other attachments for hard surface floors, for upholstery, in really good vacuums that allow for airflow. Airflow is critical. It's not the CFMs and it's not the air watts and all that. Those are certainly factors in a good vacuum design, but moving the air and how much you move it is really got a lot to do. And not having leakage through the orifice from the pickup location to the exhaust, not having any leakage is really critical. And so having a collection bag, having an after filter, an induced vacuum design like a Pro Team or a Windsor or a Clark, those are the kinds of vacuums that are professionals, and consumer products typically do not have the kind of features that we're talking about. They don't last as long, they break easier, people put duct tape on them and keep moving, and then people get sick. Because what they're picking up is biocontaminants. And our friend Michael Berry will be the first to tell you, in his book and in speeches he's given, I've heard him say it many times, and he almost gets angry about the fact that vacuum cleaners are worse polluters. They're worse polluters than cars because they expose people to more harm because of being used in an indoor environment. There's nowhere for all that soil that's being aerosolized to dissipate. It just goes right in your breathing zone. And so we got to be really careful and think more about vacuum design. It's not just putting a bowling ball on a vacuum. It's about cleaning efficacy and teaching people to use the right tools. I appreciate that the best tools out there are really professional tools. Whether you're vacuum cleaners, cleaning cloths, whatever, you're making a mistake if you don't do business and you're in the residential cleaning space, whether in a nursing home or in cleaning single-family homes or multi-housing. Do business with a Jan Sand distributor that can help teach you some of these things we're talking about, because Costco's not going to do it for you.
Yep. Now, real quick before we break for halftime here, what's the purpose of the V pattern I see people use with vacuuming? I assume it works better for me. That's what I do, but why is that done?
It looks good. That's a great thing. And
That's
you
true.
always want stuff to look good. You want your work product to look good, right? But beyond that, when you're vacuuming from different directions or you overlap, then you're vacuuming from 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 different directions. The cleaning standard for carpets from IICRC talks about vacuuming specifically in 2 different directions and overlapping each time for that reason, because of the way the carpet fiber sits, you're only going to get it one direction. But when you change directions, it's just like combing or brushing your hair. You're grooming it in such a way to evacuate that soil properly. I don't have any dirt in my hair today, but you get the point, I hope. So.
I do. And we're going to stop and thank our sponsors. We'll be back. We're talking about cleaning for health with David Kiser. here on IAQ Radio Plus. We'll be back in 90 seconds after we thank our sponsors.
IAQ Radio Platinum sponsor is John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at jondon.com. That's JONDON.com. Gold sponsors are Particles Plus Engineers and Manufacturers of feature-rich particle counters and air quality monitoring instrumentation. Learn more at particlesplus.com. Count on us. Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions available at healthyindoors.com. And AEML Laboratories, free FedEx shipping, great pricing, same-day results, and never a rush fee. Learn more at AEMLinc.com. Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions, who use advanced sensor software technology and embedded computers to provide superior environmental test instrumentation. Visit them at wolfsense.com. Association sponsors are the Indoor Air Quality Association, a multidisciplinary organization dedicated to promoting the exchange of indoor environmental information through education and research. Learn more at IAQA.org. And RIA, the Restoration Industry Association, the granddaddy of the restoration industry. Network with leaders. Learn more at restorationindustry.org.
CIRI, the Cleaning Industry Research Institute. See more deeply through science and research. Learn more at ciriscience.org. That's CIRI science.org. All right, we're back with the second half of our interview. We've got David Kiser. We're talking cleaning for health. And David, before the break, we were talking about vacuuming, and I wanted you also to, if you could, to give, you mentioned using the different vacuum attachments, which I think is really something that a lot of people don't do the way they should. Also vacuuming in a couple directions, I think that was good. We also talked about the fact of, and we didn't mention it here, I want to mention it now, of how important vacuuming is prior to carpet cleaning. I also, if you would, maybe give listeners a few other tips, at least consumer-wise. You had talked about using the crevice tool when we were on the phone. Maybe a couple tips like that.
So let's talk about vacuuming as it relates to pre-vacuuming before professional carpet cleaning using hot water extraction or dry methods, etc. First of all, when you have carpet and you just say, well, hey, look, I've got a vacuum on my truck mount or whatever, and it's going to just get the soil out as well. What you do by shooting that water into hot water into the soiled carpet is you create mud. And then when you're pulling it out, you're creating friction and all kinds of things. And the solution that you're using the cleaning with is not as effective because it's reacting with the soil load that's in the carpet that you could have removed in advance in a dry type vacuum. And so there's all kinds of reasons to vacuum before. It's going to look better, it's going to make the carpet last longer, and you're going to have a better outcome. So I want you to think about, we go into these big facilities, universities or hotels where they have large, swaths of carpet and rooms of carpet. And, most of these places will develop a carpet maintenance plan. They will create a plan because it's a big investment. Well, when you think about a homeowner and they're buying carpet and then they get upset because it wears out so quick, what do? They go to hard surface floors because, that carpet just gets dirty and so forth. Well, if they had a good maintenance plan, they understood how to take care of their carpet properly. It doesn't necessarily cost more money, but it takes an awareness of understanding how to take care of the carpet. If you're going to have good carpet, you want to have a good vacuum cleaner. if you have pets or you have children especially, you want to have it professionally cleaned, probably once, sometimes twice a year. And if you have a spill or unforeseen occurrence, you want to have some way to call in a professional if you need to. Spilt wine, for example, it can be gotten up. It can be gotten up easy with a professional's care. So going back to the vacuum is understanding that you're removing soil so your detergent or your cleaning solutions work well, that you're increasing the life of the carpet. It's an upsell. You can have better retention if you're a professional and you are vacuuming first. You say, what are you vacuuming for? I just vacuumed. Well, we're just making sure. I noticed some soil here. And it really is an opportunity to endear yourself to the customer. We did carpet cleaning with my business. Most residential house cleaning companies don't do that, but we were able to do it. And we liked it because we could go in because we had a key to the people's house and we could clean when they weren't there. We didn't have to always do it on a Saturday or in the evening or that kind of, or have the people take off from work. So it was a great add-on for us because we had the capability to do it. But we would take the care to do it right, and our customers' carpets lasted a long time and looked good all the time. In regard to other attachments and so forth, upholstery is a different kind of fabric than carpet. Sadly, I see many people taking carpet attachments like the, grooming, we called it a beater bar, but a power nozzle brush or what have you, and they're putting it on the upholstery. And so seams are coming loose. Even Persian rugs or Oriental rugs, you got to be careful with the fringe on those, or I sadly have had to pay for a couple of those. So I'm not immune to these problems either. We have all been down the road where we went, oh my. So we want to, I always love the story Don Aslett loves to tell about flooding the guy's basement with a carpet machine. So, we need to be careful and we need to be professional, and we don't want to be paying claims like that. We want to deliver excellent service. So, a couple of other tools. They make tools that will get in tight places that are longer than a conventional crevice tool. And you can go to an appliance store, and a lot of times they will have a tool that will get underneath or behind a refrigerator, for example, if you can't move it or don't want to. And that's a place where a lot of soil accumulates because the electric appliance just wants to naturally attract soil. And things get, boxes or whatever from the top of the fridge a lot of times get spilt back there, and it's a way to get back there. Some other things is you want a vacuum that is got a profile in such a way that you can clean under beds or under furniture. A lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of really bad, nasty things collect and accumulate around the bed. People shed a lot of skin at night. Bed bugs like to live down in a warm, nice place under a bed. And so we want to get rid of those. Pets tend to want to get under there a lot of times. So being able to get completely underneath the bed and not lose suction, not lose airflow because of the tool you're using. You want to have excellent airflow. There's only a handful of vacuums. The cruise ship industry has good vacuums because they know all this stuff we're talking about, and they can't afford to have unhappy customers.
What's your favorite vacuum cleaner out there for residential cleaning?
If I was talking to a consumer to buy their own, I would tell them to look at an ARCSI Electrolux vacuum. When I talk to the very best people that I know in the cleaning industry, Janet Dobbins comes to mind. You ask them what kind of vacuum cleaner they have, they'll tell you they have an ARCSI Electrolux. Lasts 20 or 30 years. It has all the features and benefits I'm talking to you about. It requires very little maintenance, and it does excellent work. And it's a great tool to take out and clean your car with and that kind of stuff too, because it's got all those attachments that get in the tight places and so forth. And it's not so cumbersome or so heavy that it's awkward to use. It's a great tool. I think professionals need to have great tools that have ability for them to work with. I would only buy one kind of striker when I was a welder because I didn't want a toy from Sears Roebuck or something. I wanted a striker that was going to light the torch the way I wanted it to. So
let me ask you this. I got a comment from a listener that in the lead industry, they teach that you, when you're vacuuming, you do 1 minute per square yard in 2 directions. So about 2 minutes per yard. What do you recommend for people? I mean, I think I see people just kind of zipping across the carpet. How long should it take you to properly vacuum a carpet?
Look, we can't even get wait staff to clean off a table the right way after somebody leaves it. So we got to live within some realm of, and ideally, I agree that's probably a good number. A minute, a yard, but. The reality is clean where the soil is. You don't have to spend as much time in the corner where nobody walks or there's no traffic. Spend more time at the entrances. Bo Bodo, he has a whole video talking about in a commercial building, the first 40 feet of that building is where all the foot traffic accumulates soil in the carpet or the entryways and so forth. It's similar for a home, having throw rugs. You have to think about slip, trip, and fall and that kind of thing for older people or whatever. But to be able to walk that soil off and have some mechanism to do that is really critical. So vacuuming where the dirt is, vacuum where the soil is. You can use a vacuum. We always used a vacuum with extension wands. This is what I loved about some vacuums. ProTeam is a good commercial vacuum for professional cleaners, and Windsor is too. Bo works for Karcher and Windsor. What happens is they have extensions, and you can suck the cobwebs and the spiders that make spider webs into the bag instead of just swatting them around to make another spider web tomorrow. It was like you never were there. So I like to get ladybugs up, and I like to get stuff up that's causing me problems and making my homes not look good. And if the rodents and the insects come back tomorrow, I haven't done my job very well.
We're running a little tight on time here, and I know you've got to leave right at 1 o'clock. So Cliff, let me have you jump in here and get any questions that you hadn't had a chance to ask yet. I got
okay, Joe. Let's why don't we just go right to Roundup, Joe?
All right, let's do it. If John's ready. All right, let's go to the Roundup. Before we do, I've got another text I'd like to read real quick. This is Scott Armour. Rules for enhanced housekeeping. I want you to comment on these. Include several secret ingredients. Attention to detail, quality control from a second set of eyes, and the most important secret ingredient is elbow grease. What do you think of that, David?
I think those are great ideas. I think that every house cleaning company and even an individual cleaning on their own, when my wife and I were cleaning houses, we didn't have a checklist, but we were pretty in tune with what we needed to do. We knew how to look around and find missed places or soil. But I'm going to tell you what, it takes humility to make a checklist, one that works, and use it. And it improves you. It improved us. It also helped our time because we were more focused on where, and we might have a different checklist for every house. Like we would have a special note about, well, these people always get their upholstery vacuum because of the pet, or we leave this door open. It might not be a cleaning thing, but we leave this door open because of the litter box, or or whatever. So those are just as important as the cleaning task itself. So I do believe that it's really, really critical that every business, even if it's a sole proprietorship operation, have standard operating procedures, that they take the time and spend, a weekend, a couple hours or whatever it is, write down your processes and your procedures, what you're going to do, not going to do, how you're going to care for your vacuums, everything about the technical aspects of cleaning. And then in regard to any processes that are one-offs for your homes, I think it's important to have a process that maybe, like we clean for several customers that had lung transplants. And so we had to have a whole different regimen in those. We had a separate addendum type list that would go with that. So I think those are critical things that need to happen. And so I think the second set of highs is great. And here's a second set of eyes for you. Look down, get down on your knees, look up, look from a different perspective, look around. Your second set of eyes could be your eyes if you know what you're doing.
Well, and you could also use a flashlight too. I mean,
it's a great thing. And a little mirror. One of those little inspection mirrors that swivel underneath that toilet ring. I had customers doing that. And I'm like, man, I got to get one of that.
Cliff, let's see, what do you got for me here, buddy?
Well, the one thing that we didn't cover that I think we should is tell us what the CIMS Green Building GB certification is all about. If you would.
So a few years ago, Jim Peduto and Dave Frank, they came up with this approach to help professionalize the entire cleaning industry of the Cleaning Industry Management Standard, CIMS. And so they went to ISSA and they developed an approach to the marketplace to help contractors especially, but other companies too that are related to cleaning industry. But it was oriented around a service contractor as opposed to a manufacturing company. When you make appliances, you have ISO standards, for example. When you make cars, you make things like that, data wafers and that kind of silicon wafers. But with a contractor in the field providing remote services, not in your location, like a McDonald's makes all their hamburgers on site, how do you apply ISO standards to that? It's not as easy to do. And so they came up with an alternative really designed around the cleaning industry. Jim's been a veteran of the cleaning industry. He's a lawyer. He understands the value of paper and teaching and education. And so they came up with a standard that includes administrative things like your org chart, succession planning, not succession planning like what happens when you retire, but succession planning that, Joe, if you had your business and you were going out for 2 days, who's going to be in charge? Who's going to make the decisions? But it also included things like what are your processes? How do you teach your processes? Do your employees know what your processes are? Are your customers happy with when they call with a complaint or a schedule change or what have you? Do you answer the phone? Do you respond to the email? How quick do you do it? Is it 3 days later or within minutes? Or could we see some of that? They want to see it. They have assessors who come in and actually look at your operation and they observe what you're doing. They talk to your customers. You can't pick and choose who you want. They get to pick and choose. And so it's a great tool. The GB part of that is green buildings. And so it's an extra little piece of the standard that's really centered around, is your company got the capability and do they have actual clients that they serve that receive green building services? That means that you use green products, not green wash products. They do the due diligence to make sure, for example, I use Dawn occasionally, you know, because it's a great tool. And well, show me where that's green. Well, I had to come up with the California state formula for that and show them that. And it's like, okay, we had to do spill guards, like absorbent guards for all of our warehousing and so forth. We had to show that we used green cleaning. We used dry steam vapor instead of a lot of harsh chemicals, and so that replaced the need for a lot of chemicals. So we were able to show our entire process of how we cleaned using HEPA vacuums.
Mm-hmm.
We used HEPA vacuums for that. We use really good microfiltration vacuums for regular cleaning, which do a great job in a home most cases. And so we were able to document not only that we could do it, but that we were doing it. And because of that, we were one of 2 residential clean services in the entire world that had the green building designation.
You know, it's interesting, David, you had mentioned earlier having standard operating procedures, and it sounds like that program is essentially enforcement of standard operating procedures, making sure you have them and that you're following them.
Yeah, I think it's a good tool. It is a little pricey for a lot of residential cleaning contractors, but I liked it. I thought it was a great selling tool. There's a lot of knowledge workers here in the DC area that understand things like ISO, and I was able to show the comparison of what CIMS-GB is to ISO. And if you've got a 10,000 square foot house and you've got furnishings in there worth millions of dollars, you like to know somebody knows what they're doing, how to take care of it. And so our CIMS-GB, because you can have a bad process, but our CIMS-GB program was able to show that our processes were good too, and we were able to telegraph that to the customer, that we knew how to take care of a marble shower, that we knew how to take care of glass shower enclosures, or high-end furniture that had lacquered finishes, those kinds of things.
David, we're running up on 1 o'clock here. Before we go, I wanted to ask, is there anything you'd like to add that we missed, or anything, just final thoughts for listeners?
Well, I would like to say this. You mentioned at the outset my background with being a founding member of the Association of Residential Clean Services International. That organization, we started around 2004, around the same time that Siri was getting its legs. And it has grown, and it's had fits and starts and so forth over the years. But there are over 700 members now, and ISSA really supports ARCSI, and they're just completed a strategic planning meeting with the new council of ARCSI, and there's a lot of fresh ideas that they're bringing to the fore to bring some new life to ARCSI. And I just want to say that if you're serious about being in the professional house cleaning industry, as a vendor, as a professional house cleaning contractor, you want to be involved with ARCSI. You want to be a member of ARCSI, even if it's just to participate in their roundtables by telephone. They have a thing called Hot Topic Tuesday, but they also, because of their membership with ARCSI, you get involved with the ISSA show, which is one of the largest clean shows in the world. It'll be in Vegas here in a couple months. And you really get to develop relationships, not just with other house cleaning owners, but people like Craig Monsell is a friend of mine. He's a retired chemist from P&G. Who gets to do that? You can talk about things, challenges you have, better ways of delivering your service, better vacuum design. And these people want to know how to help us. Jan Sand Distributors also attend that event, and they are puzzled many times at how to do business with the residential community. And so we need to strengthen that. And being an ARCSI member is critical to scaling your business, maintaining your business, and developing relationships that will really help you keep your business sustainable in your absence. There are tons and tons of people who have matured their business to be somewhat of an absentee owner when they want to be. You guys have several interests out there. So sometimes it's nice to take off and go do one of those other things. And so a lot of house cleaning business owners have been able to do that. One friend, Chuck Terpstra, he was able to go be a helicopter pilot for the police while he still owned his house cleaning business.
Nice. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us this week on IAQ Radio Plus. It's been very interesting. Love to have you back again sometime. We didn't get to talk about a few topics I think would be great to follow up on at some point. I know you've got to run. I want to thank David Kiser for being our guest today. Cleaning for health, professional house cleaning. I think that's a topic that is near and dear to many of us. Also want to thank my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick, from calling in from Chicago today. Well done. At the controls, John, you got to have faith. Most importantly, our growing group of loyal listeners. We'll be back next Friday at noon with the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.